The failure of Microsoft's smartphone efforts, particularly with the Windows Phone and later Windows 10 Mobile, can be traced to several complex factors. Despite early optimism and some innovative features, a combination of strategic missteps, market dynamics, and missed opportunities led to its downfall. Here's a detailed breakdown of the reasons why Microsoft's smartphones failed. 1. Late entry into the smartphone market. When Microsoft entered the smartphone race with Windows Phone 7 in 2010, both Apple's iOS and Google's Android had already established strong positions. Apple released its first iPhone in 2007, and Android followed in 2008. By the time Microsoft came to market, these two operating systems had already garnered massive user bases and strong developer communities. Microsoft faced an uphill battle to catch up, and they were competing against mature, well-supported ecosystems. Apple and Android had already locked in many consumers, app developers, and hardware partners by this time. Microsoft was entering a highly competitive space where brand loyalty and ecosystem lock-in were major factors. As a result, it was difficult for Windows Phone to gain traction, as many consumers had already chosen their preferred platforms. Number 2. Lack of a robust app ecosystem. One of the most critical factors in the failure of Windows Phone was the lack of apps. In the smartphone market, the availability of popular apps is one of the most significant factors for consumers when choosing a platform. From the very beginning, Windows Phone struggled with getting developers to build apps for its platform. While iOS and Android offered a wealth of apps, from games to productivity tools, the Windows Phone store had a much smaller selection, and many popular apps were either missing entirely or poorly maintained. Developers saw little incentive to create apps for a platform that had a much smaller user base than iOS and Android, creating a vicious cycle. Fewer apps meant fewer users, which in turn meant fewer developers wanted to invest in Windows Phone. Even when Microsoft tried to incentivize developers through tools, financial assistance, or easier porting of apps from other platforms, the App Store never caught up. This app gap became one of the primary reasons users turned away from the platform. 3. Inconsistent strategy and shifting focus. Throughout its time in the smartphone market, Microsoft struggled with a lack of a clear, consistent strategy. The company's mobile efforts were often fragmented and lacked focus. Microsoft initially launched Windows Phone 7, which was entirely different from its earlier Windows Mobile operating system. Then, in 2012, they released Windows Phone 8, which was not backward compatible with Windows Phone 7. This upset many early adopters who felt left behind. The final attempt was Windows 10 Mobile, but by that time, the platform had already lost momentum, and it was too little, too late. Additionally, Microsoft's shifting strategies around hardware confused customers and partners. The company initially relied on partners like Nokia to build hardware, but then it acquired Nokia's mobile division in 2013. This acquisition was supposed to boost Microsoft's ability to compete in the hardware space, but it led to a massive loss of money for Microsoft, with the Nokia deal ultimately being written off as a failure. Number 4. Lack of OEM support. Unlike Google with Android, which was able to partner with a wide variety of manufacturers, Samsung, LG, HTC, and others, to create a diverse ecosystem of devices, Microsoft struggled to attract and maintain strong relationships with hardware partners. Many OEMs were reluctant to invest in building phones for the Windows Phone platform when Android was more popular and required less investment to be profitable. Additionally, after Microsoft acquired Nokia, it essentially began competing with its own hardware partners. This led many manufacturers to focus their efforts even more on Android, leaving Windows Phone with even fewer device options on the market. The lack of diversity in hardware offerings further hurt the platform's adoption. Number 5. Carrier and retail support challenges. In markets like the US, carriers play a huge role in the success of a smartphone. In contrast to Apple and Samsung, which secured strong relationships with carriers to heavily promote their devices, Microsoft struggled to get the same level of carrier support. Carriers were hesitant to push Windows phones when iPhones and Android devices were already proven to sell well. Additionally, retail support was weak. In many cases, sales staff at major phone retailers would steer consumers toward iPhones or Android devices, often neglecting to mention Windows phones unless specifically asked. This hurt visibility and reduced the chances of new customers discovering the platform. 6. User interface and design. Microsoft's Windows Phone did have some unique design elements, notably the Metro interface, later called Modern UI, which featured live tiles that updated in real time on the home screen. Many tech enthusiasts and critics praised this design for being innovative and different from the icon-based interfaces of iOS and Android. However, this very difference became an obstacle for mainstream consumers. The user interface was a departure from the more familiar grids of icons that people had grown accustomed to on iOS and Android. While some appreciated the sleek, minimalist look, it didn't resonate with the broader market. Many users found the interface confusing or less intuitive than what they were used to. Over time, it became apparent that the UI alone wasn't a strong enough selling point to attract a critical mass of users. Number 7. Acquisition of Nokia and its aftermath. The acquisition of Nokia in 2013 was one of Microsoft's biggest bets to strengthen its mobile business. Nokia, once the dominant mobile phone manufacturer globally, had seen its market share decline dramatically due to the rise of smartphones. Microsoft believed that integrating Nokia's hardware expertise with its software would help them better compete with Apple and Samsung. However, this strategy backfired. The Nokia deal cost Microsoft billions of dollars, but failed to produce the kind of results they were hoping for. The integration of Nokia proved difficult, and Microsoft soon found itself struggling with massive layoffs and restructuring. In 2015, just 2 years after the acquisition, Microsoft wrote off nearly the entire value of the Nokia purchase, effectively signaling the failure of the strategy. 8. Competition and ecosystem lock-in. By the time Windows Phone and Windows 10 Mobile were trying to find their footing, both Apple and Google had built robust ecosystems that went beyond just smartphones. iOS and Android were tightly integrated with services like iCloud, Google Drive, Apple Music, and Google Photos, making it difficult for users to switch platforms without losing access to familiar services and content. Microsoft, while having a strong presence in the PC world, couldn't create a seamless integration between its desktop and mobile platforms that was compelling enough for users. Although Windows 10 Mobile attempted to offer features like Continuum, which allowed users to connect their phones to a monitor and use them like a PC, these innovations didn't attract the mainstream audience. Moreover, Google's control over Android allowed it to rapidly adapt and iterate, making the platform highly flexible. Apple's control over both hardware and software allowed for a highly polished user experience. Microsoft's efforts seemed to lag behind both. 9. Failure to adapt to changing market trends. Microsoft was slow to recognize and adapt to changing market trends. As Android and iOS moved quickly to adopt larger screen sizes, better cameras, and improved user experiences, Windows Phone devices often lagged behind in terms of hardware innovations. Additionally, the rise of features like voice assistants, Siri, Google Assistant, and mobile payments, Apple Pay, Google Wallet, saw little support in Microsoft's ecosystem, further distancing the platform from what consumers were expecting. Conclusion. The failure of Microsoft's smartphones can be attributed to a combination of late market entry, a lack of developer support and apps, inconsistent strategies, poor hardware diversity, and tough competition from iOS and Android. Despite efforts to innovate with features like the Metro UI and hardware investments like the Nokia acquisition, Microsoft was unable to gain a significant foothold in the smartphone market. By 2020, Microsoft had discontinued support for Windows 10 Mobile, officially ending its venture into smartphones. The company now focuses on services, software, and cloud solutions while leaving the mobile hardware game behind.